a fight to the death, literally. It's being fought in the mind, and the tool of warfare is information, but that doesn't mean that people can't get injured or killed, because as you've seen on the streets of England, people are certainly getting injured and arrested and hurt, and as we know, elderly people are being carted off to their early demise in old people's homes. So we have a bit of a serious issue on our hands, and we need to be basically grow a pair, as they say, and deal with it. You know, there's no place to hide anymore.
Help!
And tonight we're going to be discussing the gentle art of peaceful, self-loving, sovereign non-compliance. Above all, we're going to be gentle. We're going to learn to be gentle. So there's no point in getting too emotional. Even if you find out that someone's coming for you, or someone's got a syringe with your name on it, there's no need to panic, because as we'll find out, it's only a psychological operation. It's designed to induce fear, and it's fear that destroys lives and kills people more than anything. We're going to be self-loving. Self-loving is a massive component part of sovereignty. If you're not self-loving, you can't be sovereign. So you've got to learn to love yourself. You've got to learn to nurture yourself, care for yourself, eat good food, rest. If you hate your job, quit. If you hate your wife or husband, quit. You know, these are sovereign decisions. So don't stick in a situation that's bringing you down, because it's the uplift of your vibration that will see you through the tunnel of death that we're all going through. Okay? Things are going to get worse before they get better. So this is an important moment in your life, because it will make you ready for when things get worse. And it will also make you ready for when things are better. And we're going to learn to be non-compliant, because the forces that are occupying the planet and attempting to take it over rely on fearful compliance, basically. So all you have to do is get rid of your own fears. Now that is not done in an hour or two, or even a day or two. You have to work on it. Get rid of your fears. Get rid of the idea of you can lose things if certain things happen. You can't lose anything. You're born with nothing, you'll die with nothing. Okay, so why should you need loads of stuff in between? Get rid of the idea that compliance is polite, it's considerate. Okay? What other people think of you is none of your business. That's what we have to get rid of. The idea that we're bothered about what other people think. If you're bothered about what other people think, you're already a prisoner. You are already an inmate on prison planet Earth. If that's what concerns you, if what they think really, really concerns you, then think again. Look, in part one, we're going to discover who we really are at law, which is fundamental, and our sovereign rights at law. And in part two, we're going to learn how to assert those rights and to be our true selves. Houston, we have a problem. So the main problem, as I've already hinted, is that we are all too full of compliant fear of authority. So we're all too compliant and we're all too fearful. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to guess where this came from. Yes, if you've had savage parenting, that didn't help, but basically this came from school. You spent 15 years being taught how to be fearful and compliant. That's pretty much all you learned at school. When I went to school, I could already read and write, and I was already confident, outgoing. School did nothing for me. They had to switch me from school to school because they kept saying, we can't do anything for this boy. He learns too fast, we can't teach him anything. Of course they can't teach me anything. But I can learn, but I can only learn if you let me out of the classroom so I can learn from life. But in the classroom, we learn virtually nothing. I think it's an exaggeration to say we learn nothing, but we learn virtually nothing, and certainly nothing of value. And if you look up the word academic in the dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary, academic translates as of no practical value. So there's a clue as to what the education, and it's not an education system, it's a schooling system. And in other talks, I go into more detail about that. This is where the problem really starts. It starts when we're born. Because we're born on the land, and you would think, okay, that's a fairly natural process. Born to a living mother, from a living father, with a purpose. Basically, we're born under universal law, God's law, and if you don't do God, universal law, Mother Nature, natural law. And according to that law, we're born to a woman, and we're going to live on the land, and we're going to derive benefits from living on the land. Now, at some point we may have to work the land, or work to justify some of those benefits, but essentially it's an experience, it's a living experience, it's a real experience, and it's meant to be a learning place. The planet is supposed to be the classroom. That's why solid classrooms make no sense to me. The planet is where we're supposed to learn our lessons and have our experiences. If you look at the top of this page, you can see that a man or a father and a woman or a mother give birth to a boy or a son, a girl or a daughter, and they become people. They are people. And they are on the land living according to natural law. Now, natural law has translated over the years to common law. And common law is immensely simple. When someone with a uniform says to you, it's the law, they usually have no idea what they're talking about. The law is incredibly simple. Coronavirus Act is not the law, as we'll see soon. Or any act. The word says it all. Act means pretend. When you're acting, you're pretending, aren't you? So, the law is immensely simple. And it's do no wrongs, basically. And the wrong is harm to others, loss to others, fraud, dishonourability to others, and breach of the peace. That's it. That's the law. There's no other law. That's the only law you need. And all the other so-called laws are not laws at all. They're social rules. They're shipping maritime rules, as we'll see in a minute. So, we're all equal under the law. No man is above another man. No woman is above another woman. And no man is above another woman. And no woman is above another man. The only time that we surrender our authority to another man or woman is when they have sworn an oath of office and are constitutionally employed by the people, for the people, in a public office. And it's their oath of office that gives them any authority whatsoever. Their oath of office binds them to do honourable things in service to the people. Yeah? So that's the only time that anyone can tell you that they have any kind of authority. At common law, constitutional common law, if they've sworn an oath of office. Because in effect, we've agreed to give them authority. Only an officer or an official who's sworn an oath has any authority over people, over men, women, boys and girls. Now, if you look closely at the screen, at the top of the screen, you'll see that law of the land is real, it's private, it's for living beings, living souls, and it's de jure, which means in accordance with law, which means that it fits in with precedent over the many, many hundreds of years. It's been agreed by the people, and it certainly has got nothing to do with government. Okay, it's the law as interpreted by men and women in certain situations, in jury trials. And originally judges were not judges, they were just called conveners. So this is constitutional common law, and it's very, very simple. Cause no harm, cause no loss, cause no fraud, cause no breach of the peace. You'll see that there's a constable, the policeman that upholds the common law is a constable. And on the other side of the coin, you'll see at the bottom of the screen that the constable has morphed magically into an officer. And an officer and a constable are not the same person. An officer is working in commerce, and you'll see that at the bottom of the screen it's all about commercial law, admiralty, maritime law, and on this side of the screen, in this world, instead of being on the land, we're now on the sea, and we're governed by, in effect, shipping rules and regulations. rules and regulations that apply to cargo. If you're on this side of the legal coin, you're no longer in lawful land, you're in legal waters, law of the sea. And you're a person, you're many things, you'll recognise them. You're a driver, you're a taxpayer, you're a resident, you're an account holder, you're a name, you're an address, or you have an address, you're a voter, yes? Those are commercial statuses. They're not you. A living man cannot be a taxpayer, because living men are not taxable. Neither are living women, in case you think I'm being sexist. And on this side of the fence, we have fiction. The law isn't law, it's de facto. In other words, they make it up as they go along. And it's been made up by banking magnates, oil sheikhs, Venetian bankers basically originally, which is why it's the law of the sea, because Venice is on the sea. And in their eyes, they didn't think they were contravening God's law, because they said, no, God governs the land, we'll govern the sea. And in a process which starts with your certification at birth, they basically create a vessel out of you with a number and a name, and the name and the number belongs to the government. Because the law of creation, the law of universal creation, is whatever I create, I own. Think about how you get to own anything. You create it, don't you? A picture, an idea, a poem, yes? You own it. And just as you own whatever you create, if government put your so-called name on a piece of paper, they own that name. If you think that you are that name, then they own you. They don't own you really. They just own you in the mind, in your mind, because government means mind control. If you translate govern from the Latin, it's to control, and mente, is the mind. And mentir in French is to lie. So the government are there to lie to you. That's their purpose. Anyone who thinks the government is there to protect them has clearly been to school for too long, basically. The government is not there to protect you. It's there to control you. It's a control mechanism. When you're in the private, you're safe, because you're on the land. So if you're being threatened, there are lots of premises up and down the country, like the Christian Bookshop in Nottingham. They're being hounded by council and police. All they have to do is put a private notice up. On my door at home, I've just got private by appointment only. That's all you have to put on your door. And it tells them that they have no business. If they want to do business, they make an appointment and you charge them £1,000 per visit or whatever. You just do business with them, because that's all they're doing. Because they're on the bottom of the screen. They're doing business in the public. If you follow this logic, then public health takes on a different connotation. Public means law of the sea, fiction, doesn't exist, it's commerce. So how can that be anything to do with men or women on the land? It can't. So if it's commercial health, then how can that be anything to do with medicine or illness or disease? It can't. What it means is profitability. COVID public health measures are measures designed to bring about economic change, financial change, global reset, and nothing to do with health, as you might understand it. So the National Health Service, equally, you could argue, has got nothing to do with health. It's all about profit. What do I mean by profit? It means the human resource that you represent, that's represented by your name and number allotted to you at birth, they have to decide whether or not you're worth saving. You know, how profitable, how viable are you as an economic item? Your government is a corporation. The MPs all incorporate. Boris Johnson is operating as Boris Johnson Limited. So they have profit motive. They're profit motivated. It's all finance. It's not politics. There's no politics in politics. It's business. There's no health in the National Health Service. It's business. There's no justice in the legal system. It's business. There's no people care in the banking system. It's business. There's no dental care in the dental healthcare system. It's business. We've all been brought up to be extremely gullible and extremely naive, and that's what the schooling system is all about. It doesn't allow you to ask questions, and therefore it doesn't allow you to grow. And if you don't grow, you won't make it into true adulthood, true grown-upness. We have arrested development as a collective. It's not an individual thing, it's a collective thing. We have all been held back from seeing truth and knowing who we really are. So once we realise that, we have to do something about it. We owe it to ourselves and to humanity to do something about it. It's that simple. It's not an ego thing. Oh, how dare they do this to me? That's the last thing it is. It's a growth thing. It's an expression of your divine potential thing. It's nothing to get angry about or resentful. It's been and gone. But we have to acknowledge it and get on with it. And go through the processes of healing it by just letting it go. That was then, this is now. I'm now aware of what has been done to me. And it is something that's been done to you. Not for you, to you. But we can collectively outgrow it. The government, however much pomposity they portray, and however eloquent they appear to be, is a service corporation. They make policy rules. They don't make the law because they're not on the land. They're a PLC. This government is a limited company that's devolved from United Kingdom PLC. Okay, it's all incorporated business, fictional entities. But we think they're doing things for our benefit, talking on our behalf. They're not talking on our behalf. They're just doing business in the boardroom. The MPs are directors of UK PLC. Would you accept as law anything that the directors of McDonald's or BP came up with? No, you'd say, hang on a minute, I'm not an employee of McDonald's, I'm not an employee of BP, so take a hike. I'm nothing to do with you. Well, that's the same attitude you need for the government of UK PLC. It's no different. And it amazes me why people say, oh, is it a law or is it a regulation? Or has it been and gone? Is it tier 3 or tier 2 or tier 1? It doesn't matter. It makes no difference. It's not law. They're just working on your mind. It's called applied psychology. They have the behavioural insights team working on this stuff. What they put in their so-called statutory instruments and legislation is not law. If you ask them to produce it, if you have to ask a police officer to produce the law, you just, what do you mean produce the law? It is the law. No, if you say it's the law, produce it. Show me. Ask them to show you the Road Traffic Act. Is that hardback or paperback? Is it an e-book? It's nothing. It doesn't exist. But they're trained to believe it does, and we're trained to believe it does. But it doesn't exist, it's a figment of our imagination. What does exist are men, women, boys and girls with responsibilities to each other. That's the only thing that's true, and the only thing that's real. The rest is just make-believe. Now, we know that it's a global nonsense, and it's a global pantomime, and you think that I might be in a minority of 1 out of 7.5 billion, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Don't take my word for it. Because I'm only human, so I might be wrong. You have to go and research it. Yeah? If it resonates, then pursue it. Prove me wrong. Do the research and find out that the government has got your best interests at heart, that they are full of well-meaning, compassionate people who stand on the rights of other people and will answer your emails within 2 hours and will do their duty. But I don't think you'll find that. But the government doesn't make law for men or women. It can't. Remember that the government is your servant. It's something appointed by you. It's not on the land, so it can't be above you. It's not even equal to you, because it's a fiction. It's made up. It's a commercial entity. So they are simply making rules to help corporate business make more profit. That's all it is. That's all they're doing. And their rules have the colour of law, and they're called law in the law books, and barristers, judges, solicitors all call them law, but they're not law. Just as doctors would call chemotherapy and radiation therapeutic tools, but they're not. They're genocidal tools. The only aspect or lawful aspect of these so-called laws is if you carefully consider them as a man or woman and you decide that, okay, I'm happy with that, I will comply with that. And your consent infuses their rules with a colour of law. It's still not law, but you have consented. So it's as if it were law. It's you that's made it law with your consent. So a government mandate is a contradiction in terms for men, women, boys and girls. No one can be mandated to do anything. So you don't have to worry about a vaccine mandate. No such thing. A vaccine mandate is when doctors are mandated to provide the vaccines. But how are they going to get you into the surgery? Your doctor's not going to come to your home, is he? The nurse won't come to your home. You've got to go to them. They have the mandate. You have the knowledge. Who is more powerful? The person with the mandate or the man or woman with the knowledge? So that means that mask wearing, social distancing, vaccination, self-isolating, track and tracing, test and tracing, accepting or paying so-called penalty notices and fines are all voluntary acts. They're all things that you do when you've been tricked or when you don't care about your own health or safety or about your own dignity or integrity, or whether you've weighed up the pros and cons and you've decided that compliance brings more benefits than disadvantages. But it was still your decision. You may be working with false information, which you don't know is false, or you may be being bullied by a boss or a peer group, but it's still always your decision. Always. What you have for breakfast is not decided by, correct me if I'm wrong, by anyone else other than you. Is that right? Yeah? Ditto lunch, ditto dinner. So why should this be any different? The law of the land is common law and imposes a social contract to do these things. Cause no harm, no loss, no fraud and no breach of the peace. So it's basically do no wrong. You know you've done wrong. You don't have to be told you've done wrong because you can feel it in your heart. This is the law that's etched into our moral fibre. Nobody needs to write something down and stick a notice up and point to it. It's in our hearts. All other so-called laws are no more than social rules or corporate etiquette expressed in the legal language of legalese. Legalese looks like plain English, but it isn't. And these are the tricks of the trade. The bankers have got their own tricks, the doctors have got their own tricks, all the professions, the teachers have got their own tricks to make sure that we all stay in line. But the lawyers have got something called legalese, and we think that it makes sense, but it doesn't if you know legalese. Here's an example from the Metro. All persons travelling on Metrolink must wear a face covering. If you know your legalese, then you'll know that you're not a person, so it can't apply to you. You're a man or a woman. At what point did you become a person? When you stepped on that Metro, it took the legs of a man or the legs of a woman to step on that Metro. Because a person is the name on a piece of paper that was allotted to you at birth so that you can be shipped and tracked. Yeah, I mean this new digital tracking is just it's only based on the analog version, which is name, address, and national insurance number. So it's nothing drastically new. It's just an upgrade. Persons cannot travel. It's actually physically impossible for a person to travel. Only men, women, boys, and girls can travel, because only men, women, boys, and girls are living and real. Persons are legal fiction, make-believe concepts. So when I see that sign on the Metro and I'm not wearing a mask, I go, oh, thank goodness for that. Doesn't apply to me. Notice that they never say all men and women, boys and girls, travelling on Metrolink must wear a... They would never say that. You never hear a sign that says men, women, boys and girls, do you?
No.
And the reason is because they know that they cannot oblige you to do anything without your consent. So there's no point even asking for your consent. There's just no point. So what they do is, they pretend that you're a person, you fall for it, and as a person, you think that they can oblige you to do anything. Well, they can if you think you're a person. Just as in school, a teacher recently said to a parent, "We own your child." At law, that's correct. The school does own the child. Because the child is a name on a piece of paper that's based on the name on the birth certificate, and it's registered at the school. And registration in Roman law means that whatever you register, you surrender its authority, or your authority over it, to the government. Registration, you're surrendering regis, which is authority, supremacy, sovereignty. Men and women have innate sovereignty that they can't surrender. But persons are already surrendered because they don't exist. They're just pieces of paper. Must wear a face covering, must in legalese, if you know legalese, must, because even the most corrupt lawyer would have to admit that you can't force a man, or you can't oblige a man or a woman, boy or girl, to do anything. That would just be a crime against humanity. That would be torture. In legalese, must is interpreted as may. So if you redefine this, it would be all fictional names belonging to the government may wear a face. It's nonsense, it's gobbledygook, it just falls apart. How can a fictional name wear a face covering? Legalese versus plain English, another one. Your child must. Well, in legalese, you is a nonsense. In English, you is plural anyway. Singular is thee, thy, thou. Again, child, name on a piece of paper, legal fiction. If you have any problems with the school and you yourself refer to yourself as a parent and to your boy or girl as a child, you're surrendering authority to the school. And is it any wonder why they vaccinate even though you said you didn't consent? Your consent was irrelevant. Pieces of paper cannot give their consent. Legal fictions cannot give their consent. So if you want to be relevant and powerful and sovereign, be a man or woman with a boy or a girl in your ownership. How can a piece of paper how can it have it's just nonsense. Pieces of paper can't wear a face mask, and social distancing is a nonsense. If you know anything about humanity, you know that distancing is antisocial. So it's all utter rubbish. But not enough people are seeing through it. They will, but it's going to take a very painful awakening. As a sovereign man or woman, we're all born with unalienable rights as a living soul. They're only surrendered by consent. No one can take them off you. And they are surrendered by default if you break one of the 4 laws. Yes? Which is cause no harm, cause no loss, cause no fraud, cause no breach of the peace. Otherwise, do as you please. These are some of the unalienable. And lien means restriction. It's a restriction, but it's a restriction in commerce. Liens are commercial things. So once you know who you are, you know that they can't attach any commercial charge or commercial restriction on you. It's all business, guys. It's nothing else. Right to life. Well, of course you were born without the right to life. What was the point of being born? And that's the right to make your own decisions, the right to breathe fresh air. So when you make the sovereign decision not to wear a mask, you're exercising the right to life. It's that simple. Doesn't matter what anyone asks you to do. Doesn't matter whether they're interested in your reasoning. It's irrelevant. Just say, exercising my right to life. Not that it's any of their business, because you've also got right to privacy. So if they're asking you why you're not wearing a mask, they're trying to get you to surrender your right to life. Why would you do that? They're also infringing your right to privacy. So you just say, right to privacy, mate. None of your business. Right to freedom of movement. Now I know there's been rallies going on and the police are kettling and doing all kinds of things to restrict people's movement. That's a total infringement of common law rights. As long as the movements are made by peaceful men and women with benevolent intent, the police have no, it's not a police matter. So if they are Detaining, arresting, bullying, assaulting, this is not policing. This is a military operation. You have become, inadvertently, the enemy of what they consider to be their state, which is the corporate state, which is more of an estate. It's more of a global fund than anything else. The right to peaceful assembly. I mean, churches are now being raided, or have been raided, by so-called policemen and women who really aren't policemen and women, in my opinion. They're something else. And they barge in and say, sorry to interrupt the party, but time to go home. Why do they go home? If they know who they are, they just say, we have the right to peaceful assembly, the right to worship. What business is it of yours that we're here? But they're not doing that. They're complying because they're too frightened not to. Because the tone of voice, it's all in the tone of voice. The people who are complying, either willingly or against their will, are still too frightened to stand up for themselves. So this is the reason behind why people like me do what we do. All we want is people to stand up and be counted. All we need you to do is simply say no. That's all it is. It's the ability to say no. And if you're speaking out, as long as it's peaceful, not inciting violence, you can say what you want. That's your freedom of speech. Publish thoughts, again, they can't touch you if you're publishing thoughts. They can deplatform you because it's their platform. But if you've got your own platform, they can't touch you. If you can't find a platform, just get out on the street. They may say, right, if you stand there, or if you do this, you do that, we're going to fine you, and or give you a notice, penalty notice, and fine. No such thing exists. It's all a bluff. And even if they think it exists, and you do end up with paperwork, you can just send it back. Because they're doing it in commerce, it's business. So you can just say, no thanks, not doing business. Nice offer, respectfully declined. But when we were at school, watching programs on cop show programs, those cops were the heroes, weren't they? And so when a cop says you need to do this, you do it, because in your own mind, you've been trained to help the hero, your TV hero, catch the criminal. But now, in 2020, you're the criminal. Everyone here tonight is a criminal. Simply because you're not following the mainstream narrative. So someone will shock you, someone will snitch, someone will ask the police. When I've been doing the rallies, a guy walking past called the police on me, and he couldn't believe that the police wouldn't arrest me. He was shaking his head. Why can't you arrest him? Well, it's quite simple. I wasn't doing anything arrestable. I mean, I was just doing this. Holding a microphone, talking. How is that arrestable? But this man seemed to think that what I was doing was criminal and arrestable. That is the problem that we have. That there's still too many people think that non-compliance is in itself a criminal offence. There it is, the right to worship. So, those churchgoers who went home dutifully had surrendered their right to worship. Why did they do that? Well, almost certainly because they were too frightened to do anything else. They've been watching the television, and on the television people get arrested and clanked over the head. So there's all kinds of weird and wonderful things going on. Nothing is as it seems, folks. When you see a police officer on his own, like there was one in Australia, picking a girl up by the throat and then throwing her down and sitting on top of her, that's acting. That's not real. Because he could go away for 20 years for that. Just because she won't wear a mask. That's almost a life sentence he's getting himself into there. Yeah? Why would a police officer risk a life sentence just because a woman isn't wearing a mask? You have the right to silence, the right to not to self-incriminate. When we're asked questions, like the guy, the tattoo artist in Bristol, was doing very well, very knowledgeable guy, and he was defending himself, defending his sovereignty extremely well, but then at one point he just surrendered his sovereignty. And he surrendered it when he answered a question, because a WPC rocked up after several failed attempts, and she said, "What are you doing?" And he was in the process of tattooing someone. And he said, "I'm working." That was him gone. And we'll look at that more in part 2. So he surrendered his right to silence, and therefore his sovereignty. As sovereigns by birth, we are all equal under the law. An obligation to do anything can therefore only exist by contract or by consent. Simple as that. Roman civil law is he who remains silent when he ought to have spoken or was able to is taken to agree. So there are times when silence is golden if you're exercising the right not to self-incriminate, and there are times when you must speak up. If you're asked to accept something as true, legal or valid, and you say nothing, your consent or agreement is presumed in their world. Except when you're exercising the right to remain silent and not self-incriminate under common law. These rights are presumed surrendered, like I said before, when we break the law, if you're in breach of the peace or cause harm, loss, fraud to another man or woman, or we are a driver in a vehicle and there's a suspicion that we've committed an offence or been involved in an accident, or there's a reasonable suspicion that we're driving uninsured or unlicensed. Those are pretty much the only 4 situations. Or we're reasonably suspected of being infected, but not infected with COVID. COVID's nothing. That's official. COVID was downgraded on March the 19th. So all these COVID police measures are fictitious to begin with, and fraudulent because COVID isn't even a health threat. So it's all nonsense. And if that wasn't enough, they're only a result of ministerial preferences called statutory instruments, regulations. Am I obliged to give my name and address and surrender my right to privacy and to silence? No, but there are consequences. There are consequences if you broke the common law. There may be consequences under the Road Traffic Act. You can walk away, but they may take the car. Remember, you can always walk away. Unless you've committed a crime, you can just walk. Yeah? They've got the car, they've got what they want. They can get the name and address from the car if they need a name and address. Suffice it to say that all they want is the car, because it's all about business. It's all about compliance and keeping people under the thumb. They don't need to arrest you for anything. They just want you to comply, and so taking the car and impounding it and possibly crushing it is a nice little manoeuvre, because it means next time you'll think twice before doing what they say you did. Or you're a potentially infected person. We've realised that there are no one is a threat at the moment and until further notice, because if like me you don't believe in infectious disease, then you'll know that there is nothing you can catch from anyone else. Otherwise you could catch their headaches, or their depressions, or their tummy aches. Yes? Or their swollen ankle. Don't come near me, your ankle's swollen. Human Rights Act 1998, I'm not going to go into it, but basically this is a backup. In case when you're speaking the language of the law, in case they come over all confused, then you can switch to their world and talk about Human Rights Act 1998. Human Rights Act 1998 does not mention men or women, as far as I'm aware. So the assumption is that it protects human rights. The problem with that is that in Legalese, human translates as monster. And I think one of the chief protagonists in this global vaccine movement is not a doctor. Well, we know it's Bill Gates, one of them. He's not anything. But one of his lackeys that he's delegated substantial responsibility to is not a human doctor, he's a vet. So they're telling us that we are animals, useless eaters, useful idiots, whatever language you've come up with in your research, but to appoint a vet to look after human health on a global scale. I think that kind of says it all, doesn't it? I don't even go to a doctor. I certainly won't go to a vet. Any legislation is a pretense, it's an act. Your common law rights are real, but only if you know you have them, if you know you're ready to stand on them, because it's not enough to know you have them. If you're, as soon as any pressure is brought to bear on you, if you run for the hills, there's no good knowing about your rights if you're not prepared to stand on them. And you also need to know how to stand on them. And that's what we're going to have a look at in the next episode or part, which is part 2.